Belle Gunness, the widow who advertised for husbands, then made them disappear. She placed Lonely Hearts advertisements in Midwestern newspapers, specifically seeking men interested in marriage, always mentioning her prosperous farm and comfortable finances. Suitors arrived at her Indiana property with their savings and were never seen again. When her farm finally burned down, investigators found something that turned a suspicious house fire into one of America's most disturbing serial murder cases. Belle Gunness, a Norwegian immigrant who had settled in the American Midwest, established a farm near La Porte, Indiana, in the early 1900s, following the death of her first husband under circumstances that, while not formally investigated as suspicious at the time, would later attract considerable retrospective scrutiny once the broader pattern of her subsequent activities became apparent to investigators. Beginning around 1905, Gunness developed a specific, sustained pattern of placing matrimonial advertisements in Midwestern newspapers, particularly those serving Scandinavian immigrant communities, specifically describing herself as a prosperous widow seeking a suitable husband, advertisements that consistently emphasized her comfortable farm property and financial stability, details genuinely, specifically calculated to attract suitors who possessed their own accumulated savings and were seeking exactly the kind of prosperous marital match Gunness's advertisements described. The specific pattern that eventually emerged, reconstructed by investigators following the eventual discovery of her activities, involved suitors responding to Gunness's advertisements traveling to her Indiana farm, often bringing considerable personal savings with them, sometimes explicitly encouraged by Gunness herself through correspondence preceding their actual visit, savings these men apparently believed would be invested into their prospective shared life together, before these same men subsequently vanished entirely, with Gunness typically providing acquaintances and neighbors various explanations regarding her suitors' sudden departures that, in retrospect, investigators determined were almost universally fabricated. The specific catalyst that eventually exposed this sustained pattern came in April of 1908, when Gunness's farmhouse burned down in a fire that killed several individuals present at the property, initially including what appeared to be Gunness herself, along with her children, a devastating fire that, absent any subsequent investigation, might have simply been recorded as a tragic, accidental house fire, claiming an entire family, rather than becoming the specific catalyst that ultimately exposed a considerably larger, more disturbing pattern of activity. What transformed the fire from a simple tragedy into a genuinely significant criminal investigation was the specific, persistent suspicion of Azel Helgelien, whose brother Andrew had previously corresponded with and eventually traveled to visit Gunness before subsequently vanishing entirely, prompting Azel to specifically press local authorities to investigate his brother's disappearance in connection with Gunness's farm. Pressure that led investigators to conduct a considerably more thorough search of the property than the fire's aftermath alone might otherwise have prompted. This more thorough investigation revealed genuinely, disturbingly significant additional evidence, as searchers excavating the property discovered multiple human remains buried across the farm grounds, ultimately identifying the remains of numerous individuals beyond the fire's immediate victims, remains investigators eventually connected to a considerable number of Gunness's various suitors and other visitors to the property, who had previously been reported missing following their documented correspondence or visits to her farm, transforming the investigation from a house fire inquiry into the discovery of what appeared to be a sustained, systematic pattern of murder extending back several years. The specific identity of the adult female victim killed in the original house fire itself became a genuinely significant point of subsequent investigation and dispute, since the badly burned remains initially identified as Gunness herself were later determined by some investigators and forensic analysis to be inconsistent with her actual known physical measurements, specifically regarding the remains' apparent height and other physical characteristics, raising the genuine, seriously considered possibility that Gunness may have actually killed another woman specifically to stage her own apparent death. and successfully escaped the property before investigators could connect her directly to the broader pattern of killings the subsequent excavation revealed. This specific possibility that Gunness may have genuinely survived the fire and successfully evaded capture entirely has remained a genuinely significant unresolved element of the case in the considerable time since, with numerous subsequent reported sightings of individuals believed to potentially be Gunness reported across various locations in the following years, none of which were ever definitively, conclusively confirmed, meaning the case's actual final resolution regarding Gunness's own specific fate has never achieved complete, universally accepted historical certainty. Ray Lamphere, a farmhand who had worked for Gunness and who investigators determined had genuine, direct knowledge of and likely involvement in at least some aspects of the broader pattern of activity at the farm, was formally charged and tried in connection with the case, though his own trial focused primarily on arson charges connected to the house fire itself, rather than the broader murder allegations, given the genuine evidentiary challenges involved in formally prosecuting the broader pattern of killings absent Gunness's own direct presence to stand trial herself. What makes Belle Gunness's case endure as one of history's most significant and genuinely unsettling examples of sustained serial murder isn't simply the considerable scale of victims investigators eventually connected to her farm, disturbing as that scale genuinely remains, but the specific calculated method she employed, using genuine matrimonial advertisements and the specific promise of prosperous domestic partnership, to systematically lure a sustained sequence of victims directly to her own property, combined with the genuinely unresolved question of her own actual final fate, that has left this specific case without the kind of definitive, complete closure most comparable historical criminal investigations eventually achieve. If stories like this, where a killer's own case remains genuinely unresolved because nobody has ever definitively confirmed whether she actually died in the fire she may have deliberately started herself, are exactly what you come here for, subscribe to the grave details, because history holds more stories like this than most people will ever know.